Welcome to the Expand Your Experiences podcast. I'm your host, Rashawn Stevenson. This is a show where I deconstruct experiences and how they help us develop into the best version of ourselves. I'll be facilitating conversations discussing the frameworks and experiences that help shape our lives. Enjoy the show. Welcome to episode 8 of the Expand Your Experiences podcast. I'm your host, Rashawn Stevenson. Today's episode, just like all the other episodes, is one that I'm really excited about. But before I get into my guest, I want to say that if you are listening to this episode and have listened to any of the other ones, and if you feel that these episodes bring you value or that they could bring someone else value, I ask that you share. And not only do you share, but if you have a chance, go by and leave a review and leave some stars. And what that does is it says to the algorithm, this show is delivering value in the podcast space and more people need to hear it. So it kind of bumps you up in the listening queue for new people to discover. So that's a little small ask that I have. If you find that, only do it if you find that it's, adding value. But now it's time to introduce my guest for this episode 8. His name is Jason Devon Little. Jason is a photographer out of New York City. I actually found Jason's work some years ago, and he's just someone that I respect in the space just due to the fact that he covers so many areas of photography, but the one that we discuss that resonates the most with me is his protest work that he's been covering. And we all know these last couple years have been crazy, due to COVID, due to the police brutality and different situations like that. So there's been multiple protests that he's had an opportunity to cover, and just being in a city as dynamic as New York and being out there with a camera and, approaching it from a standpoint of humility and just being a part of representing himself and representing a bit of the culture through art, through photography. That's just something that I got a lot of respect for. So not only that, Jason's actually a award-winning photographer. He's had his work displayed all over the world: Portugal, Germany, different parts of New York City. So he has a lot. He's a wealth of knowledge and somewhat of a philosopher in the space, if you will. So enjoy the show, and thank you for tuning in. I'm grateful. So I'm gonna be honest, and this is probably the first podcast that I've actually been nervous to do. I actually have Jason Little on today, and I've been following Jason's work for some years now. And he's someone that I respect in the photography space. He's someone that I respect in the activist space. It's just so much different levels of respect that I have for you. And I wanted to tell you, one of the things that I really like about you is your humility. For the years that I have been following you, I've reached out to you multiple times about questions that I might have had about photography, and you've always hit me back. You've always kind of, give me information that if I needed it. And I just like your style, man. So I wanted to say it's an absolute honor to have you on the show.
I appreciate it, man. I guess it's just I just try to have a general love of photography and other photographers in the space. And my attitude is everybody help everybody. Everybody needs it at some point. Whether it's a simple question or can I borrow a battery or a memory card or something. I think everybody's got to be there for each other.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that, and also, man, I'm drinking coffee. I know it's nighttime for where you are, but this show, I pulled out my New York cup.
I see you. I see. I like
it. But in preparation for the show, I was doing some research, man, and I found that there's a word that you commonly use, and when you talk about making photos, and that word is awareness. Why do you think awareness is so important in general, and how do you think awareness contributes to your work?
Well, we work in a visual media. You can't make a good photo without being aware of what's in front of you. Even if it's just a portrait. You have to have an awareness of the person in front of you beyond just what they're wearing, just beyond just what they look like. If you want to make a really good portrait that captures somebody's attention, you have to have an awareness of something about this person's personality. You have to connect with them on a deeper level than the outward appearance. In order to make a really moving portrait, something that grabs your attention, something that makes you want to look at it for more than 3 or 4 seconds, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the same thing is when you're walking around in the street, or when you're photographing activism, protest, or anything. You have to have an awareness of not just what is physically in your space, what's taking place around you, but an awareness of what it means to be in that space at that time. Whether you're on the street on an average day, you taking what's around you, having awareness. What time is it? All the people getting off of work, are they going to work? They're dressed this way, they're dressed that way. Whatever the case may be, you always have to know something deeper about the place you're in.
Yes. And being that you're in New York, I feel like, well, actually, I'll tell you a quick story. I took my kids to New York for the first time early July. And I was trying to tell them, I was like, hey, you have to pay attention at everything that's going on around you, because there's so many things going on, so many moving parts of this city. It's not like in Virginia. I mean, you got to have awareness no matter where you are. But in a city like New York, you really have to have a certain level of awareness, because, a lot of things are happening at one time. And if you can kind of see what happens before it happens, sometimes you can, avoid danger or whatever the situation is.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. A lot of moving parts, a lot of people doing a lot of different things. So yeah, even from a safety perspective, you have to always have an awareness. The advantage of being used to a place like this, living on a daily basis in a place like this, is that that sort of awareness becomes second nature. Your surroundings, how people move, how they operate. So it's not at the front of your mind all the time. You're not walking out thinking, oh, let me be careful. It's just sort of a thing. You just have to know, that kind of have to have a little radar, be able to sense things.
Well, what else is something else I find interesting is, like, I live here in Japan, right? And I'm not saying that people aren't aware, but the awareness level is different than it is in the States overall.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because it's a much safer place, not as much crime, not as many things to be. Our awareness as, Americans or whatever is different in certain foreign countries, but especially here, because there is such a low crime rate.
Yeah. Americans are hyper aware. It's a whole different kind of awareness. All we hear about is some new mass shooting every day, and that sort of thing plants itself in people's minds. And they take it everywhere. It's unfortunate, but they take it everywhere they go.
And don't even try to turn it off. Like,
right,
you can't turn it off.
Yeah, you can't really blame people for that. I'm sure that people can't feel comfortable going grocery shopping anymore. It's it's a sad way to be. But yeah, Americans are hyper aware.
When you're not out with your camera, this is something that I often do. And I spoke to another photographer about the same thing. I'm just curious to hear your thoughts. But when you're not with your camera or with the camera, are you looking around? Are you visualizing? Are you seeing things in your mind? or you see certain situations that if you did have a camera that you would capture?
Oh, for sure.
Are you
Uh,
taking pictures all day, every
yeah,
day?
always. I mean, sometimes I might just, run to the store real quick or something, for whatever reason, if I'm without a camera, which is rare, but if it happens, I'm like, I'm looking at the way the light's falling over here, or I'm looking at this thing over, right? And I'm like, if only, right? But I will at least have my cell phone on me, and I'm gonna get a snap because I tell people always just get the shot. Just get the shot. It doesn't, if it's not perfect, that's fine because you can go back another time. Just get the shot. So yeah, but I'm always looking.
So one of the things that I also like about your style is that you consider yourself genre agnostic.
Yeah.
I never heard it put in that way because I feel that I'm the same. That's also my style, but I just never heard it
Okay.
termed like that. But and you picked up a camera around 2008, right? Would you
Yeah,
say
jumping
that?
like regular. Yeah.
Okay, so would you say that that has always been your style, or is that something
Yeah.
that
I'm
developed?
just no. I would just shoot whatever. I can't think of the photographer at the moment, but he says something to the effect of, "I photograph things simply for the sake of knowing how they look photographed."
Mm.
You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And sometimes that's all I want, you know? And I might put my own twist on it. I might see it from this angle or that angle, as opposed to somebody else. But I will shoot anything that captures my curiosity in some way. Anything, anybody. It doesn't matter. So I don't tend to just box myself in as a street photographer or, whatever the case may be. I just like to pick up a camera and shoot.
How many cameras do you have? I've read your blog and I've seen times where I'm like, man, how many cameras does this guy have?
Okay. So here's the thing, people might take that the wrong way. I shoot a lot of film, right? And I started when film cameras were like crazy cheap.
Yeah.
So if I spent $20 on a camera, a couple times a year, that's nothing, right? It's just not like I got a ton of digital cameras, like expensive stuff. So I
Yeah.
do have several film cameras that I've had for, pretty much since the beginning. And, maybe 10, 12 cameras. And yes, I do use them. People ask, do I collect them? Do I just leave them out to look pretty? No, I actually use them, you know?
So I mean, how do you decide what you use that day? Like is it similar to is it based on your mood? Is it based on what you feel? Is it based on what you're going to try to do? Like how do you determine?
It's a lot of time on mood, but the interesting thing with these old film cameras is that different cameras, different lenses will produce different effects. They render different ways, right? And I can say, you know what, I for some reason I just want to use my Olympus OM1 and the 28 millimeter. It has a certain look, right? And so that's what I'm gonna go with. Or my Minolta XE7 with the 50 millimeter 1.4, it has a certain look. So that's what I go with. So it's just a feeling or a mood, it just depends. And sometimes I just want to use that particular camera. I just mentioned the XE7. That camera, there's something about the way that camera just feels in my hand, the shutter, the film release, everything just has a certain feel that I'm just sort of so addicted to. I love that camera. It's probably my favorite camera.
So that's probably why when you said it's rare that you're without a camera, because when you're walking out of the house, you're looking at your
Yeah, I
your
got
toolkit and you just like, oh, let
yeah,
me just grab this on the
I
way to
got
the store real
options.
quick.
Yeah.
But you also said that well actually let's back up 1 second. You were inspired. I know two people that you were inspired by was obviously Gordon Parks, which I think that's one of all of our uh
Right.
you know Michael Jordans of this space, if you
Yeah,
will,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
and Elliot Erwitt. And there's a he had a quote that said he thinks the main ingredient to photography is curiosity, Do you
Mhm.
agree with that or disagree?
I agree. For some people, it may not be the main ingredient, but it definitely has to be one of them. You have to be curious about. Yeah, I think it's sort of the awareness thing. You have to be curious about things, anything, whatever it is you might want to shoot, um, or else you have, what's your motivation for even photographing it? And Elliot Erwitt was somebody who you could see the humor in his work, you could see the humanity in his work, depending on what he was doing. I know he did a series of dogs, right? And he somehow managed to make that look amazing, you
Mm-hmm.
know. And I think that was just a result of his curiosity, and that curiosity um, spurred him to take an interest in dogs and their owners, and once you have some interest, a real interest in your subject, it's easy to have compassion. You can shoot them with dignity, and that's
Yes.
something that does matter to me.
So also, just how comedians, right? So you'll listen to a comedian, and a comedian has a unique way of telling the truth or what they see, or telling the truth based on what it is their perception of the truth is, and they can say things that we all may experience or we all may think about, but they make it in a funny way. I
Mhm.
Do you feel like photographers also do something similar? Obviously, but it's not with what we say, but it's what we convey through our lenses and through the images that we capture.
Yeah, because even when you're not trying to, I think you convey the world through your specific interpretation, which is actually hard to do. You know, I know people have said to me, "Oh, I saw that shot and I immediately knew it was one of yours." You know, that has been a road, right? You don't just automatically achieve that, but I think that is a goal, and I think it's a goal, it remains a goal to continue along that line. But you get to the point where you are conveying the world through your specific interpretation, and it won't look exactly like somebody else's. Like you said, with a comedian, you can have several of them saying the same thing in very different ways. And so to me, it goes back to this thing of style. How do you develop your own style? Comedians do it, and any type of artist does it. And so to have somebody say, "Oh, I knew that was your shot," is kind of an important thing.
Mm, definitely. I mean, it's interesting because you know with you photographing New York, and we talk about like we were talking about L.A. Irwit, but that one particular shot that he has, probably which is my favorite, is where there's a lady, I'm assuming it's a lady, and she's sitting on a stoop. It looks like in New York. I think it is in New York, but she's holding a bulldog, but the top
Right in
portion of,
front of her. Yeah, yeah, I know. Yeah, I know the shot.
yeah,
Yeah.
that shot is so sick. And the thing is, it's like it's such and he does it he did it in a way that like it does capture humanity, but it also
Mhm.
has that level of humor to it, like you said. And when I see your shots, I see, well, it depends on what type of shot it is. I mean, I think, and like being that you shoot so many different, whatever moves you, um, I just like the mood of your shots, and the
Mhm.
mood that you shoot with translates through all of the different genres that you shoot, which later on I want to talk about, your protest photography. But overall, is there a specific type? I mean, I know you shoot whatever, but like, is there something that you enjoy the most in terms of the subjects that you capture?
I wouldn't say the most, just people and places. I do like to capture how people interact with the places that they're in. You know, so I can go to somewhere like Grand Central, and I can stand and pick two or three different spots, and I can be there for an hour or more, and I'm just fascinated. You know, and get home and look through the images, they won't all be keepers, of course, but I'm just fascinated at this sort of, this orchestra that's happening in front of me. This movement of people through this massive space, and who knows where they're going. And so there are all these unknown stories connected to each person, and each person is passing another person, and they're unknowingly creating images for me, as they pass, going on about their day. So for me, just in general, it's just people moving through spaces, interacting with spaces, and sometimes with each other, and that's just just something that fascinates me.
Did you always, so growing up, I mean, did you know when you were a kid that you were going to grow up and be a photographer? Is that something that you knew?
I didn't. I used to play with other people's cameras just because it was there. It was like, oh, cool, the Polaroid era, you get a little, image that comes out, and, 2 minutes later you got something. But no, I did not ever once say, oh, I'm going to do this, like, seriously one day. Not until college, really.
What did you think you would do? What did you think you would be when you grew up?
Oh, man, I want to do so many other things, but basically, I read a lot as a kid, and I'm a very, I guess what I would do outside of photography is very science minded. I love science. People, even now, people sort of refer to me as their personal, the personal explainer. They want to know, oh, how does GPS work? Or whatever the case may be, and I explain it to them. So who knows? I could have been doing something like that, but I just always, as a kid, I always had so many different interests. I was one of those people in college who changed their major, a whole bunch of times because, I wanted to do this thing, and I was like, nah, I want to do that thing. So,
What made you buckle down and like dial in on photography?
It wasn't really anything deep. One day I took a shot. I had a little point and shoot, and I took a shot that I really liked. It was like a library, and it was framed. This really cool tree framed around it, and I was like, this is really good. And I made a little, sort of not great quality print of it and hung it up. And I was like, I could see myself doing this on a much deeper level, and that really was it, And I got a better camera, and just kept sort of upgrading, through there, and here I am.
So you grew up in a military family. Was like your mom or dad in the military? What branch of service?
Father in the Army.
Army. Okay.
Yeah.
Where in what did you move?
He's retired now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so they're down in Texas, and yeah, I mean that really didn't play any role into my photography at all, because by the time I took that image I was just talking about in college, I was, I was on my own. I was just in college at that point down in Texas, and who knows which major I was on by that point, my third or fourth one.
Right.
And so that just, it was something about that moment.
Do you think? So, for example, here, because I'm in Japan, I feel that my curiosity and my awareness has my attention on so many things. I'm just fascinated by everything about the culture, the country, things I see that I've never seen before. So I feel like I try to capture Japan in a way that I can show to people who may not have been here before or may not ever come here. I can show a good variety of the things that fascinate me here in Japan. But I think coming from the US, it gives me a different appreciation or perspective on what it is that I see, just because I'm not like a native of the area.
Right.
Did you feel like that's how it was when you came to New York? Was it?
I mostly no. There's this idea that you'll hear tossed around sometimes that there are New Yorkers born every day, but not born in New York, right? Just people who are, it's like they're meant to be there, you know. For some people, it's an easy transition, right? And so for me, I want to show New York as it really is. I'm not gonna glitz it up, although there's certainly that side of it, But for others who might, maybe they'll never come, or maybe they'll only see New York in images. I just wanted to show as many different sides of it, authentic sides of it as I can, right? Like we live, it's residential, We're away from tourism, right? You go down, if I go downtown, go to something like Times Square, it's nothing but tourism, right? That's both of these things exist, within just a couple of miles of one another, and so I always just want to show as many different sides as of that as I can.
Hmm. New York is dynamic, man.
Yeah.
It's just so many things to like you said, you can go to Central Park, you can go to Times Square, you can go anywhere, you can go to Brooklyn, you can go to the Brooklyn Bridge, it's so dynamic. Um and I mean, you shoot you shoot landscape, you shoot the architectural skyline, you shoot street, but to me, all of that's incredible. But the most compelling work that you shoot is your protest stuff. And the reason
Mm.
that I find that the most compelling is because you capture emotion and humanity all in one.
Well, I was just going to say, you can't really have one without the other. When people show up for whatever the case may be, whether it's Black Lives Matter or whether it's even for climate, these are things that people are emotional about, understandably. These things are things that really, really, really matter to people. So they're gonna be loud, they're gonna be outspoken, they're gonna be um, uh, plainly emotional about it. And when they show up, my goal is not to make a spectacle of it, you know, um, because I'm there too, right? I don't consider myself to be a photojournalist in a traditional sense, right? Because I'm not neutral on these things. I'm not there just to observe and be dispassionate about it, right? I have a stake in this, you know. So when I'm there to document, I'm gonna do my best to portray whatever's happening in a dignified way. These people are not there to be made fun of or belittled in any way. And that's something that I feel really strongly about, and that's why I want to capture it in the way that I do.
But throughout the time that you've been capturing that, was that your intention from the start, or is that something that developed over time throughout you shooting these protest coverages?
That's a tough question. I don't. You know what? In the very first night I went out, honestly, it was, I guess, back to that curiosity thing. It's like I mean, I knew what was going on, but I was just there to really document. And I get down to Union Square, and it's a couple of vans on fire. There's some people getting arrested, and it was kind of chaotic. And so, I mean, at that moment, I think I was just there to document, you know, and I didn't expect the movement to be as sustained as it was, right? I was like, oh, a couple of days, we had curfew and some stuff like that. But, I'm thinking this is probably not going to be more than a week, but it became much more than a week. And, people put their blood, sweat, and tears into organizing around these issues. And, and once I saw that it was sustained, that it was prolonged, I knew that there's a real human cost to this. The human element is front and center for me, and that really was uh, what I wanted to document. Sometimes you can get an amazing photo, a really dynamic looking photo, and people will be wild over it. But no matter how incredible a shot might look, for me, it always came down to the human element. These are real people.
Shooting every day when there's no burning cars on fire is one thing, right?
Mhm.
But being out there with your heart racing, with there's so much emotion and energy in the air, how does that change you? Like, what does that feel like? What's the difference between feeling like you're out just on an everyday shoot and now you're out and you like you said you're there to document, but what does that feel like? Does it are you do you are now you engulfed with that type of emotion that's going on around you, or like, I guess I'm just trying to figure out what does it feel like to be out there with a camera, because even if you're just out there as a protester, it feels a certain way, but what
Yeah,
is it like to be out there with a camera?
believe me, it's I had the same emotions that they had. I'm going through the same things that they did. I mean, like I said, I never made a distinction between myself and them, other than the fact that I had a camera, right? But the camera and my um, insistence on making a good photo, or making a photo that actually captures the essence of the day, caused me to sort of keep the emotions in check.
Mm.
You know, like I can't get too caught up in that. Even though I'm feeling the same thing. I'm totally on board with them. I'm on the same page. Um, I'm not viewed any differently just because I have a camera, right? So all of that stuff remains in effect. But it's me saying, all right, I'm out here to do something, right? So let me make sure I do that thing, you know. But yeah, like the heart racing, the things. There were certainly times where things went from 0 to 60, before you even could look up, and things are going sideways. From that perspective, again, it's back to awareness. There's sort of a running joke right now with me and some of my other, photographer friends, who didn't get arrested in the process.
Hmm.
We kind of joke like, how did you not get arrested? And yeah, I mean, yeah, I put some of it on lock, but some of it is just knowing where I was at, in relation to other things around me. There were certain places where when I did see things go sideways, I'm already looking for an out, you know. Um, so again, awareness and just remaining focused on what I felt I was out there to do.
Hey, you said you didn't get arrested, but is there a siren out here in the background? Maybe they coming to get you now, man. You talked that up. Maybe they heard you. It was like, we gotta circle back around to get this guy.
Yeah, yeah.
So I lived in Baltimore during the time of like Freddie Gray. And I lived near kind of where everything was going on. And everybody would hit me up and be like, "Hey, are you okay? Are you okay?" And I'm like, "Yeah, that's only one part of the city that all of that's going on."
Hmm. Right.
Um, do you feel that you have a responsibility to, and you kind of answered this earlier, but I want to talk specifically to the protest coverage that you document. Do you feel like you have a responsibility to actually, how you capture it is going to be different than someone from CNN or
Mhm.
Fox News and so forth,
Right.
because you have a stake in it, A,
Mhm.
and B, you are there to document. You're not there to show one perspective or the other. Do you feel like you have
Yeah.
a responsibility in that?
Yeah, that's one of the other things that I felt in the beginning. That night I was talking about when I first went out to Union Square, and some of those early nights, I would come home and watch the news, and they would tell the story in a certain way, And I'm sitting there thinking, that's not what happened. And I was there, you know? And when I saw that happen, I just felt like, again, not only do I just have a stake in this, as a Black person, but the story's got to be accurate. You know, I mean, nobody cares about me compared to CNN. I'm just some guy with a camera, okay? But I am out here capturing what's happening, and I'm seeing what's happening with my own two eyes, and then I'm comparing this to what's being shown on the news, and they don't match, right? So but that's the problem, And I felt like, okay, well, back to me being just some guy with a camera, fine, I'll be that, but I'm gonna capture what I see happening, and if I talk about it, if I write about it, whatever the case may be, I'm gonna be sure to do my part to keep the narrative in check.
I mean, and I think that, and that's what makes the work compelling. Because you are, and that's when I really, really got drawn in to, your protest coverage. And I know that you run, a couple different Instagram pages, one that, mostly you shoot film, and you also, but are you officially, like, do you have an official position in terms of capturing protest coverage?
No, there was a time where I was with a collective known as New York City Protest Coverage. It was about, I think, eight or I don't know, 8 or 9 of us. A little off with the number. A loosely sort of bound collective. And we did do a lot to establish ourselves as a go-to source. People did trust us. And we were, at least a couple of us would be everywhere. For whatever was going on, and people knew that they could come for us to find out information. They could come to us to find out, if there was an arrest, or a mass arrest, where everybody was at, things like that. And it didn't last. That particular part of it didn't last the entirety of 2020 or whatever. But when I joined that, the man who started it noticed me, even though I was out there on my own. And when it ended, I was still out there on my own doing, the same things. So most of this has just been me and a camera trying to tell a story.
How would you say that you've changed just as an individual, being so close and capturing so much of that, and being there day in, day out from the beginning? How would you say you've changed as an individual, just from being like in the mix?
Mm. It's hard to say. I think it's just given me a deeper appreciation for our current place in history. When I would look back at, as a kid, I guess we all saw things like, the civil rights movement and all these old black and white pictures, and you sort of think, wow, that was so long ago. And I guess it really wasn't that long ago. Our parents and grandparents that may have lived through that. Um, and it just sort of becomes a side note, although I was always interested in those kinds of things. But it was a side note because I had no personal connection to it. And so to go through the pandemic and sort of everything that came along with that, gave me a much deeper appreciation of where we are right now. To go through that and to come out of it at the other end with all the imagery, all the footage, all the memories. In some ways, the memories are even more important than the footage. All of that really solidified things for me. It made me, again, more appreciative of being able to come out the other end of it. If you think about the pandemic and how many questions there were, I mean, nobody was, what's happening? This COVID thing, nobody understood it. Everybody was just sort of paranoid. And, I know a lot of people went through it alone. I fortunately didn't have to, it's just me and my wife here. We don't have kids, anything, but we got through it together, and so I'm thankful for that, because that was, it was as much stability as really anybody could ask for in the situation. And the same during the protests, to have to see these things on a daily basis, not just George Floyd, but Jacob Blake and Breonna Taylor. And the list, the names are just growing, and it's taking a toll on you. So it was just really important to come to that time and to have, somebody here with me who was, who provided that sort of mental stability, after I'm outside. And then, I leave at 10 a.m. and come home and it's dark, and, who knows what has happened during the course of that day. It was just really important to have that sort of stability. And I'm grateful to her, that she was there, for that, because I know not everybody had that.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, and support like that and having that during that time, because like you said, so many people didn't have any kind of support, and some people were, obviously affected in much more extreme ways, so you're right.
Yes.
Like just the gratitude coming away from that, is big. But you did mention memories, and I kind of want to drill down on that for a minute. As a photographer, I'm sure that you shoot certain shots and you remember what you were thinking. You remember what you saw. You remember what you needed to do to get this particular image. What would you, I mean, and this is probably a super hard question, but you can give me as many as you want. But being that you've been in the mix of the protest coverage, are there any particular shots that moment plays in your head often, like a moment that you saw or a moment that you felt that just, you often think about, or you thought about more than one time after it happened, just because there's such deep emotion with that?
Yeah, I couldn't even begin. I wouldn't even know where to start. There's a lot of those moments. But one that I refer to often, maybe just in my own head, is what was it? Martin Luther King Day. It was a march that started in Brooklyn. Everything was cool. Everything was peaceful. The moment we came across the bridge, it just went upside down. It turned upside down. People were attacked by the cops, and this was shortly after the January 6th thing, right? And it was a bad night, right? And so it's crazy that those memories are so stuck in my head. But I'm out here trying to get shots at night. It's already difficult. But the next day we all hear, like, everybody's just kind of asking what was the point of that response. Like, we did nothing but walk across the bridge, and what we hear is, oh well, we knew you guys were going to end at City Hall, and we didn't want another version of January 6th. And I'm like, why would that even be in your heads? Nobody in this movement has ever given you reason to think that, right? So it was just nonsense. But that night was a bad night, and I have some really strong images, or photos from that night. But looking at that, it's just like, we can't get a day. Like, it's just like, they're relentless, I'm sure, if I sit here and think long enough, there are others. But at the same time, the other side of it is that some of the memories I have, some of the best photos I have, are also happy moments, joyful moments, or moments where people felt victorious. So, really, honestly, it ran the gamut, of emotions from despair to happiness, anger. It was, I've captured it all, I think.
I would also assume that you've also gained some good relationships just from being out there too.
Yeah, absolutely. They're, you know, they're a second family to me. These are people who, if I didn't see them, for between now and 10 years from now, if we bumped into each other, that connection would still be there, because, from day one, when I went out and didn't know any of these people, and we are just crossing paths on a daily basis, and we're getting closer, getting to know each other, and helping each other through these situations, going through stuff together, having to deal with the police and all this kind of stuff. For months at a time, people who I've known since 2020 now, we've definitely formed some strong bonds, and it's a small knit group that I'm closest to, but we are very close.
I want to talk about process for a second. Because obviously, you have digital cameras, you have film cameras, and film, requires more process. Is there a part of that process that you would say, and I know most things as a photographer aren't absolute. It's not that one thing or the other that you enjoy more. I mean, it just changes depending on what the situation is. But what part of the film process? Okay, so film is just the whole process in general. Like, you're taking the picture, you're doing this, you're moving so many stages. Is there a stage that you enjoy the most?
I enjoy the most. Okay, this might sound a little weird, but development, right? I have this. I'm not gonna say love-hate relationship. It's a love-anxiety relationship with development, because no matter how many times I've done it, and I've done it hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times, every time when I finish a roll, I take it out the camera, I put it into the development tank, put those chemicals in there, do the timing, the whole nine. Every time when I'm done and I'm ready to pull that developed roll out of the tank and see if there's something on it, it's like my heart stops a little bit. Like, I hope something's on it, you know. And every time I look and I pull the strip out and I look and I was like, images, every time. So, yeah, that process is, I love it so much, and there's just that little bit of anxiety, where you always hope you didn't screw it up.
Well, I know what you mean, because that's the kind of anxiety I had prior to talking to you. I was like, man, I don't want to mess this up. I was like, I'm getting this guy on, and I want to make sure I'm prepared, because I really because I'm such a fan. I really I'm such a fan of what you do, and I also, but I was like, man, I've had hundreds of conversations. I've had
I mean, we just a couple people talking.
Yeah. And that's what I had to ground it to. It was like, you know what? It's just a couple people talking. It's no different than any other conversation. But I know what you mean in terms of, but I think that little anxiety is good. I think it's just a sign of, it's no different than, a professional athlete going out to play a game. I mean, you've been playing this game your whole life. But there's a certain level of it that, because you love it so much, that there comes a certain level of anxiety. But that anxiety is what helps you prepare. It's what helps you when you're out with the camera, to capture those moments. You know what I mean? It's that anxiety that kind of pushes you.
Yeah, that makes sense. I agree. Like I said, everything's not going to be a keeper. The thing with film is that you pay for that roll of film, right? So you're basically investing, some dollars into each shot you take. So you can't afford to be reckless, with what you're taking. You have to be thoughtful about what you're doing, where you point your camera. You have to know. You got to know your stuff, because it's not automatic metering and all this stuff with the like with digital cameras. So I'm much more thoughtful about pressing that shutter button when I'm shooting film.
Underlying theme has been awareness. So, I mean, I guess that still will fall under that will fall under the awareness category, where you're just not out pushing that button.
You can't be it can't be wasting money, And if I don't get the shot, I don't get the shot. I'm not gonna cry about it. It happens. I would love to put in a roll, 36 shots, and take it out, and I love every shot on, 30. I'm 36 for 36. It doesn't happen,
Mm-hmm.
But I do know that it's not because I was just, out there being reckless.
Right.
There's no delete button. Like, I put a memory card in my other camera, like, yeah, I didn't like that. I can just delete it, it's not like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I've never actually shot film. I've only ever shot digital. But I agree. And I always say, but I always try to have the mindset of that. I don't want to be
Right.
spoiled by I have as many exposures as I want.
Yeah.
I always
Yeah.
try to, even though I'm not shooting film, I try to shoot from a film mentality, which I know I can't fully do that because I'm not
Mhm.
pulling out putting the chemicals and pulling it out
Right.
and looking at
Right.
it. I'm
Yeah.
not doing that. But when I look at it in post, I want to make sure that I want to have to do as little to it as possible. Like I don't want to have
Right.
to.
Right. Yeah. And I have the same philosophy on that. I've said to people, like, the more conscious you are about what you shoot, and I'm talking digital here, the less work you have to do when you get to your computer, right? Because I've known people, will go out and they take like 1,000 shots of something, and I take 200. That's less work.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Especially if you hate to edit, like going through and having to edit 1,000 shots or even a few hundred shots, it's a lot of work. But if you think more about what you shoot, try to get the shot you want in the first place. You have less work to do once you get to your computer.
Right. And I mean, and I found that, and obviously I didn't start out like that, but when you start and you go back and you look at it, it's just a part of the process. It's a part of your learning process. It's you go back and you're like, oh man, if I would have just did this, I would
Yeah,
have had
yeah,
that
yeah,
in the frame better. Or,
yeah.
oh, okay, now if I, increase my exposure here, I could, so
Yes,
it's just different little nuanced things that you learn throughout and that,
yeah,
ultimately it
absolutely.
makes you better.
Yes, yeah, yeah, totally. So that's why, I tell people, don't be so quick to delete the shots you don't like. Don't just throw your mistakes away. Like, keep that, look at it, look at what you don't like about it, look at what you do like about it, right? And then next time, you just build from that. You know.
So this is all photo philosophy we're talking here.
Yeah.
Do you think that there are some of those photo philosophies that you live your everyday life by? Like, are there some principles that you feel like are just how you try to live your life outside of a camera?
Yeah, I don't chase perfection. I know some people do, and I know some people might think, oh, he's a perfectionist with his photos. But I've said many times before, I think sometimes your best shots are the ones that are actually not perfect, right? Right, because they capture something raw, right? Even if you didn't mean to. And so to just be in a moment, or to just whatever happens, happens. Of course, you do your best on a daily basis to, go about your day in the best way you know how, and you just sort of roll with the punches. Sort of like how I was saying in the beginning. If I answer something in a certain way and somebody's mad about it and they want to, go on an Instagram rant because I said this thing and that thing, oh, oh well, I said what I said, kind of
Right.
thing. And so, yeah, I mean, sometimes I capture an image and it's not necessarily what I intended for it to be, but I like it, you know. And so it's just kind of how life goes sometimes, and sometimes you just roll with the punches, you do your best, and just, live one moment to the next.
Yeah. How important is one of my philosophies that I feel like that is a life philosophy, and also it translates to me with the camera, is how important is the present moment?
At that moment is the most important, which it doesn't disregard what happened before it, and it doesn't overlook the potential of what hasn't come yet, right? The past and the future, they both matter, but it's the now, right? Where you're gonna sort of make the foundation. You either build off of what you came from in the past, and make that foundation for what you want to establish next. What hasn't come yet, right? But you have to be focused on. You have to have, again, awareness of the now. And so that, yes, this applies to very much to photography. And I think to life in general.
Well, it applies to life in general and photography because, just to add, I feel like the present moment is what creates the future and the past at the same time. I
Yeah.
mean, you capturing an image, it's creating the past because now that's an image. That image could live forever. Some of the things that you're capturing in those protest coverages will be documented and people will see, hopefully, hundreds of years from now to understand what was happening in the same way that we look at civil rights images and images from, Renaissance Harlem or whatever it is. And we see that prosperity and despair based on images that were captured in the past.
Right. Yeah. Things that we weren't there for, but the lessons are permanent. What we take from it, every generation after that can take something from it. I agree. I look at those images again, and I'm much more connected to those things now after having spent the past couple of years documenting similar things myself. And before that, I said, yeah, these are great images, but I'm so much more connected to them now because of that.
For sure. Man, it's just so much in terms of just everyday life. And that's why I love talking to photographers or artists in general. I mean, because I feel like a lot of times there's a certain perspective that comes with being an artist, whether you paint or whether you take photos or whether you make music. I think there's a unique way that you view the world. And with that being said, I'm also curious as to, what are some of the, and you're a brilliant writer too. So, writing, photography are very different, but are there any other artistic expressions that you really enjoy, whether it be that you just enjoy as a fan or that you enjoy doing?
Oh, I'm a huge music fan. When a lot of times when I'm out on the street, just doing street shots, I have my headphones in, I'm listening to, who knows what. Anybody who knows me even a little bit knows I'm a Wu-Tang fanatic. Like, that word comes out of my mouth a couple times a day. Like,
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm an 80s kid. I'm a hip hop kid. This is all in my ears all the time. I love it. I'm a scholar about that kind of stuff, so.
Well, I want to get into that for a second, but there's one shot you have. It's a guy, it may be two people. One person's holding a street sign and it says Wu-Tang something, and the other person's holding maybe it's like two street signs. They're holding like the top.
Yeah.
So that was an easy one for you, huh? You were like, oh, I got it.
That was kind of an old shot. Yeah, there was I think it was for this push to keep arts in school. A lot of schools had dropped their arts programs, music programs. So you had a lot of people from different artistic disciplines come out, and just talk about the importance of music and painting, photography. Teaching kids these things, teaching kids how to appreciate art just in general. We don't want these things cut out of schools, right? And so there was this guy there. He had these big green street signs like you'd see, Fifth Avenue or whatever, and had Wu-Tang. And I think the other one was the Beastie Boys. I can't remember now, but
it was something. It was another. I think it was Beastie Boys Lane, Wu-Tang Parkway, or something like that.
Yeah. So yeah, I just I thought that was really dope.
Yeah. Do you play any instruments? Have you ever? Or you just
No. I'm just I'm here to listen and enjoy and philosophize over these things and talk about it with whoever will give me the time of day. So
yeah. Well, we're coming down the home stretch, and before we do, can you go over how can people connect with you? How can people find you to check out some of these things that we're talking about?
Okay, well, I'm on Instagram. My the page that I'm most active on is my film photography page. So that's Highlight Hustle. That's HALIDE.HUSTLE at Instagram. You can also find me on J Divine Photography on Instagram, or you can find me on my website, which is jdivinephotography.com.
Yeah. Now, let me ask you, when people go find you, well, it's two questions. Well, I know I said we were wrapping up, but I just thought of like a few more questions.
Yeah, it's all good.
But one, when people go find you and go look at your work, what are you the most proud of about what they're gonna see? What are they're gonna interpret however they interpret it, but what are you the most proud of about being able to showcase your work?
I think I'm that I'm gonna portray, or that I am portraying, whatever portion of the movement they see, the fact that we lived through an era that for my generation is unique. Okay. The fact that I was able to document some part of that, right? So whether they see some of my shots during COVID, and I didn't post a lot, even though I shot kind of a lot, I didn't post a lot of, like, sort of New York as the ghost town, kind of thing, because sort of right after that, before you could even really get your bearings, the whole George Floyd thing happened, and the protest photography, sort of took center stage. But at least for now, I'm proud of the fact that people will see that I was simply here to document what I feel like were pretty momentous times. Whether they like it or not, whether they agree with my perspective on things or not, isn't really the issue for me. I get people disagreeing with me on a daily basis. I'm fine with it. But it's there.
Mm, I like it. Um, Also, I like your, is it pronounced highlight?
Highlight hustle, right? So a lot of people think they refer to me as that. They think that that's my name, and so what I explain to them, like, no, Halide, HALIDE, that is it's a part of the film, right? It's a component in film, right? So that's why I use that name, because I shoot actually more film than digital, right? So I'm all film, But they'll say, oh, Halide, I'm like, okay, that's not actually my name, but I'll answer to it because I know what they mean.
Yeah. No, I just think that's dope that how you embedded that into the name, and people who would know, what it
Yeah,
means,
yeah, 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 yeah.
but it's almost like a dog whisper to other film shooters,
Right.
you know what I'm saying? It's like, and a person that comes over like, hey, Mr. Highlight, you already know, like, it's
Yeah,
a whole
right.
different.
Yeah.
But one question that I like to ask is, if you could, and I'll ask you differently because you're a photographer, but like, if you can photograph any time, any era in history, what time would that be? What era would that be?
Oh man, that's a tough one. We just spoke about the Harlem Renaissance, and I would have loved to photograph during that time. But I also feel like I would have liked to have been around for the phase of New York where the bridges were being built. For example, you have this era, like right before the Brooklyn Bridge, where the river is congested and people are, trying to get across the river all the time and falling in and all. I mean, it was chaos. It was chaos. And then somebody comes along, this genius comes along and says, all right, I engineered these plans in my head. I'm gonna build a bridge from Manhattan to Brooklyn, and I would have loved to have photographed that process. You know.
It's interesting because when I came to New York, I didn't realize that the Brooklyn Bridge was, I believe, the first suspension bridge in the country,
Mm, yeah.
right?
Yes.
And also, and when and you talking about documenting that period, but people, it was so much congestion and everything, but people were weary about crossing the bridge based
Yeah.
on the fact that it was suspension, and they had to
Yeah.
prove that
Right.
they got P.T. Barnum to bring elephants and walk elephants across the bridge, right?
Yeah. 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 It was, it's, New York, it just, the stories, I mean, it's just so many stories. Um, I can't even imagine being around for that. Just, it's just, you know. So yeah, if I look back at images from the time where, like, the Chrysler building is being built, and I don't know how I would have felt about being that high up, but but to document that process of the skyline becoming um, the that symbol that we know it to be now, would just, I think, would have been amazing.
Well, you got my mind spinning now because I'm thinking about, you know, New York has always been a uh, kind of like a pillar of not success, but there's always been a certain level of diversity. There's
Hmm.
always been a certain level of prosperity. There's
Hmm.
always been a certain level of just so New York has always been dynamic since the beginning of whenever you can think of New
Right.
York, even
Right.
going back to when the Dutch came. Like,
Yeah.
and to think back to when the Dutch came and what it looked like back then and being
Right.
swampy and an
Right.
island to New
Yeah.
York
Yeah.
now know. And the building of that,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah. It's a serious evolution, and I've said before, this is, yeah, it shouldn't work, right?
it should.
This is a city that, when you really think about it, it shouldn't work, but the fact that it does, I mean, I have no words for that. Like, I couldn't put into words.
But do you think that because it does work, there's a certain level of magic that exists within New York and New
Yeah, absolutely.
Yorkers?
It
Because
is that thing that you can't put your finger on. There's no single word to describe it. Um, it just is, it just is. And I think everybody can feel it, you know, try to describe New York to somebody. It escapes words for me, but you come here, you can feel it. You look around, I know some people are overwhelmed by it, but this is, it has that lore for a reason.
mm, yeah. Well, like these are all things that I'm just thinking about in this conversation. So it's just like, it's insane just to think about because you're right. It shouldn't work to know what it was, to know Manhattan is an island and you have all this, and now it's a
Right.
concrete jungle
Right.
and this, that, and the third in the water, and it,
Yeah.
it's it's
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. All of that. What you just said, all of it. It shouldn't work for all those reasons and many, many more.
Yeah.
But it does, and I always say it's because of the people.
Mm.
I think sometimes we don't always like our leadership for good reasons. But New York is, for me, about the people. I love the architecture. I love everything, all that kind of stuff. But the people, you know, New Yorkers are, that's where it's at. It's the people that make this place what it is. There is a sense of community here, despite the millions of people. People they find their families here. Even if it's not their biological family, they find the people that they feel most akin to, people that they're most connected to. Um, and Yeah, it's.
I mean, but in addition to, I guess I'll add on to that and just say it's the people, but it's the diversity of the people
Yeah,
too,
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's
which means that the city, the whole dynamic has to work in a way that is suitable for so many different types of people. And it doesn't make it suitable. Like New York just isn't this suitable place, but all these cultures, all these different people have to come together to make it work. And
Make it work. Yeah.
that is what makes it work, which is what you said,
Yes.
the people.
Yes. Yeah. It's a cooperation. It's an appreciation and enjoyment of cultures other than your own. You know, we coexist. You know, we exchange foods and ideas and all of these things. You know, and yeah, sure. Like anywhere you go, you got people who are not on board, right? And then sometimes I'm kind of like, well, why are you here? You know, kind of thing. But those they're in the minority. You know, like most of the people here, no matter what, no matter where they're from, their language, whatever the case might be, you know, people are here just to make the experience that much better. You know, and you can find that in simple things. You know, go eat at a certain restaurant. You know, walk through a certain neighborhood. It's you know, it's always there's always an exchange taking place.
Yeah. Well, I know the exchange for me, as soon as I touch down in New York, is always getting pizza. That's the first thing. That's first and foremost. It's first and foremost. And I'm going to go ahead and publicly say, not just because I got you on here, but I think New York pizza is better than Chicago pizza. So just...
that's not even a question, but I'm glad you put that out publicly. So let all your listeners know, because if I say it, I'll sound biased. But
right, no, this is me saying this, and because you know, I like Chicago pizza, but I'm just saying I just don't understand why people make a comparison to the two. It's just not the same.
Right. Okay. Got you.
It's just not the same.
Yeah.
But but anyway, my final question, Jason, is what do you think is one thing that everyone should experience?
Joy on your own terms. You know, find that thing that brings you joy. You know, you might not figure it out overnight, but it's, and I don't mean just sort of something that gives you a laugh, you know, which is great. You know, I think everybody loves to laugh, but something that truly gives you joy. Like, I love this thing or this person, whatever the case may be. You know, find that thing on your own terms that you say this thing, doing this thing, or being with this person, or talking to that person, or whatever the case is. You know, find that thing and hold on to it. You know, I think everybody deserves that, and unfortunately, not everybody gets it for, you know, one reason or another. But you don't want to pull that back from yourself, and you don't want to let somebody keep that from you. So.
Wow, that's actually pretty profound, I think. I mean, just because, like you said, whether it's, you know, it's joy from you picking up a camera or someone you love or whatever it is that gives you joy, it all boils down to that. But that's not even the best part. The best part is the fact that you said on your own terms, not allowing society to decide, or your parents or your spouse or whoever to decide what is joy for you. You defining joy on your own.
Yeah. You gotta, and again, that's why I said you may not get to that point quickly. You know, some people spend a long time figuring out what it is, and I think sometimes that the extended time comes from buying into other people's ideas. You know, your parents want you to be a doctor, they want you to be this thing or that thing, you know, whatever the case may be, and you do that, and you wonder why you're miserable, right? You know, and that sucks. Like, you can't live your life out that way, right? And so when you figure out what that thing is, you're set.
All right. Well, I think that's a good point to put a pin in, and I just want to say again, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this, And
Man,
next
thank you for the invite, man.
and next time I come to New York, though, we're gonna have to go out with the Fuji films, and you're gonna have to show me the nooks and crannies of the city.
Hey, you come here, got me email, text message, whatever. I'm there. You just say the word. I'm there. We get some beats while we're out.
Yeah, and yeah, because I'm pretty sure you know where to get the good, the non-tourist stuff.
Yeah, right, exactly.